Hey, everybody. I'm Nikki Vachon, she, her pronouns, college access counselor at FAME, joined by the lovely Florica Malwell, and she's going to tag team with me to make this super interesting. This is very chill. I just want to say I would love to have you unmute yourself or ask questions in the chat because we're watching that too. Love to hear about your experiences because not only are we going to tell you about this, but you may have seen something that we haven't, and I learn something from you every time I present too. So jump in there when you want to. So here's our little agenda. We're going to do basics. The FSA ID, you guys, I cannot say this enough. It is so important to this financial aid process. And it is just username and password. But let me just tell you, knowing the basics, very important. So we're going to talk about the basics. We're going to talk about how to set up an FSA ID. New process this year that we just had, that people without an SSN can create an FSA ID, and we're going to talk about some known issues and some troubleshooting. We've got ideas and tips and tricks. Love to hear yours. We're going to share some resources. So just to start out, like, what is an FSA ID? Okay, so the FSA ID is the username and password you set up that allows you to access studentaid.gov. And I refer to studentaid.gov as the mothership. This is the website where all the stuff lives. The FAFSA, if you want to apply for aid, you need to get a username and password to log in to file the FAFSA. If you want to take out a student loan, you have to sign the loan application. That's called a master promissory note. This is going to serve as your electronic signature for that loan application. And really, that's what this is. The FSA ID, the username and password, this is your electronic signature. This is how you sign those legal documents. New this year that we just had is that the IRS will import tax information into the FAFSA for you. But the IRS, I don't know if you know about this, but they're kind of sticklers for privacy. And they really want to make sure that they keep our data safe, which is what we want them to do, right? So we use this username and password to give consent and approval for the IRS to send any information they have on file for us for a particular year to import it into the FAFSA. Now that's going to come up later when I talk about who needs an FSA ID. The critical piece of that is being able to give the IRS permission to send our information to the FAFSA. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but just know that having this username and password set up correctly allows the IRS to send our data to the FAFSA. Now, important to know is that when you set up this FSA ID, it gets tied to our social security number. So when we set one up, later on down the pike, if we can't remember our username and password, we can't just set up another one because it's tied to our social security number. So each individual has their own username and password, right? So that's going to be mine forever. If I'm a student and I use it to apply for financial aid, I can use that same username and password to sign my child's FAFSA or to access the parent portion of the FAFSA. If I want to take out a student loan or a parent student loan, this is how I'm signing that application. So it really is it's a multi-use thing, but that's kind of the gist of what is that FSA ID. Okay, let's talk about parents for a second, because this I find is like the most confusing part for, we answer a lot of questions about parents on the FAFSA. So if a student is considered a dependent for FAFSA purposes, that means that we are requiring parent information on the FAFSA if they're a dependent. Which parent needs an FSA ID? Well, let's take one step back and let's say, which parents do we need on the FAFSA? And I always use a little house, like who's in my little household, okay? So if a student needs parent information, let's talk about if both parents live in the same household. They're going to have to put both parents' information on the FAFSA, and we call those people contributors. They are contributing their information to the FAFSA. So if both parents live in the same household, both parents are going to be contributors, but they both don't always need an FSA ID. Hold tight on that for a second. If parents are divorced, separated, never married, and they live in two little households that live separately, we're going to figure out which household provides the most financial support to the student. That household is going to be the household contributing their information. And that gets tricky when we figure out, like with I have 3 stepkids, and we shared between 2 households, and we split everything right down the middle. All those expenses, like, we shared right down the middle. And if your situation is like that, like which households would you use? We're now going to be looking at which household makes the most income. And this, honestly, it can be very gray and hard to figure out. Do your very best. That's what I tell people to do. Once we figure out which household, then we know those folks are going to be contributors, including step parents. So let's say that I'm going to be the parent household on my stepchildren's FAFSA. It's going to be me as a step parent and my spouse. It's going to be both of us. A lot of people don't think step parents have to be included on the FAFSA, and they actually do. Okay, so on the back of our FAFSA checklist that you can download, Fleur, can you put a link in the chat to our FAFSA checklist? On the back of our FAFSA checklist, we have this flow chart as to who is my parent when I fill out the FAFSA form. And that explains really, if you start on the left-hand side, are your parents married to each other? If yes, they're both going to be there. This kind of goes through what I just did in the little flow chart form. But on the far right, this is where I want folks to know who is not going to be on the FAFSA, because a lot of folks think that they need to be on the FAFSA when they actually don't. So it's only going to be biological or adoptive parents. Okay, so if you are not biological or adoptive parent, they're not going to be on there. So when we think about like a widowed step parent, if I've worked with a lot of students who live with a widowed step parent, they are not considered on the FAFSA as a contributor unless they've adopted that student legally. Grandparents, foster parents, brothers, sisters, aunts and uncles, anyone that student is living with, unless they've adopted them, we're not considering them a parent on the FAFSA. Okay, so now we know who's a contributor. Let's talk about who needs an FSA ID, okay? Now, remember how I said the FSA ID is really important to the IRS being able to give consent, to be able to release our data into the FAFSA. So let's think about, in our household, if the parents filed a joint tax return, you've only got one tax return. So we don't need both parents to give consent. We only need one parent to say it's okay to send our tax data into that FAFSA. So if the parents filed a joint tax return, and this is for the upcoming FAFSA, if they filed a 2023 federal tax return, they filed a joint, only one parent needs that FSA ID because they're going to give consent for both of you. But if parents file taxes separately or don't file taxes, like, each person has to give the IRS permission to release their data. And that's also confusing to folks who don't file a tax return. They don't think they need an FSA ID because there's nothing on file. That's not right. They actually do need an FSA ID to give consent for the IRS to say, I don't have anything on file. I hope that makes sense. If it didn't, please throw that in the chat. Any questions in the chat we need to answer, Florica? If you have any, feel free to jump in for me.
No,
okay.
No questions. The link is not working, but I'm gonna send another link. I'm not sure.
Okay, sounds good. So when we go to set up the FSA ID, it looks a little bit different when you're using a computer versus a phone or a tablet, any kind of a mobile device. So the big picture in the back is like a computer screen. If you want to go set up your FSA ID, you're going to go to studentaid.gov, and on the far right, you're going to see create an account. But if you're on the phone with someone and they're like, I don't see create account, I just see a little person in a menu, that means they're using a device, right? So you're going to click on menu, and the scroll down is going to come where it says create account there. That was a big learning curve for me when I was like, but it should say create an account. Well, it doesn't until you click on menu. Click on menu a little further down, it's going to be there, create an account. Before we set up the FSA ID, I want to have the following things ready, because this application will time out eventually, guys. Let me just tell you that we want to make sure we have all our stuff together before we even start. We want to have the legal name, the date of birth, and social security number. We want to make sure we know exactly what that is, because behind the scenes, when we set this up, that data goes to the Social Security Administration to make sure those 3 pieces of data match. And that whole match process takes 1 to 3 business days. So make sure you have that. If you have that social security card with you, awesome, that's great. Not many people know where theirs are, so that's fine. Just make sure you know what that information is. We're also gonna need a permanent mailing address. And required, you must have an email address because we're gonna talk about two-factor authentication in a second. One of the things when we set this up, we need to have an email address and we need to have access to it when we set this up because we're gonna get emailed a 6-digit code. Now, I work with parents who say, I don't use email. I don't use it. I say, okay, I got you. We're gonna set you up a Gmail account in 5 seconds. You'll be able to use that, if only just for this. But we do actually have to have an email address. We don't want folks to use their high school or work email addresses. I actually left an old job and I no longer had access to this email, even though I would have access forever. No, hard pass. So we want to make sure that we have a personal email address we're using for this. If possible, we love folks to have their mobile phone as well to be able to set this up because we're going to get texted a 6-digit code. Now, this is not required, but we really want you to have this if at all possible. We're going to have to select and answer 4 challenge questions and create a unique username and password. On the left-hand side of my screen, you can see we set up these, we created some worksheets for folks to document this, to write this down. And I know people don't like, I work with the youth that roll their eyes when I say, listen, just make an old lady happy and write this stuff down. You're going to need this for maybe 14 years. Okay. So we created one for students. We have a separate one for parents. And on the back of this, we have directions on how to set it up. So go ahead and get that.
And I also like to add with that form, like some students lose the form. So I learned this from somebody else and I do it by myself too. You can take a screenshot of it and then go into your notes and build in like a lock note. So you can have that screenshot and every time you want to access that, you will put in a password. So it's kind of like a file within like a file. So it's on your phone and you can have it anytime. So that's a cool trick.
That's a great idea. I had not heard that. So I talked about two-factor authentication. Anytime that you log in to studentaid.gov, you need to either get a text or an email with a 6-digit code. And now they have access to authenticator apps. So if you we need to have an authenticator app for work. When I log into the computer, I have to say, I get a pop-up on my phone that says, are you the one signing in? Yes, I am. So you can connect your FSA ID this way, or you can use your email address or your cell phone number. So that's why it's important when we set this up to have access to that email because we are going to get those texts. Okay, so no questions, Florika, before? Oh, Jess, please jump in.
I just want to add one thing. I just wanted to repeat what you said, Nikki, about this timing out. If you don't do this in a certain period of time, it makes you start over again. And in this case, unlike the FAFSA, it does not save. So you can have a family working really, really hard to pull everything together and they time out because they were working hard to get it all together and they have to completely start over again. And it is super frustrating. So having everything ready to go when you're sitting down to create the ID is really important.
100%. Yep. Ahead. There we go. Okay. So, and I'm going to finish up this last slide and then hand this over to Florika, but I just want to mention that at the very end of this setting up process, you're going to get a backup code. And this is a very long number letter combo that folks can use if you're like me and you set this FSA ID up with an old work email, and now you don't have access to that email, and you never had a cell phone that you tied with your FSA ID. You can use this backup code as for one time. It's a one-time use situation where you can use that instead. So you're going to log in, you're going to use your backup code, then you're going to go fix your email address and you're going to put a new one in and maybe add your cell phone because we definitely recommend that. It's one-time use. So if you have used this and you need to get a new one generated for the next time that you have to use it, you're going to go to settings within studentaid.gov. You're going to go to your profile. And there's a section you can choose, which is two-factor authentication, and you're going to generate a new backup code. Okay, So I'm going to hand this over to Florika, who's going to talk about, for those people who don't have an SSN, this is super exciting this year.
Thank you, Nikki. And for those individuals who don't have Social Security, they will need to go through this process. So for individuals whose parents have a Social Security, they'll just go ahead and create an FSA ID normally. There's going to be trigger warnings because it wants to make sure that individuals do have a Social Security number, because sometimes individuals will just click on things, so many things popping up. So they'll go ahead and indicate, I do not have a Social Security number. And then they'll go, switch.
Sorry.
Okay.
I opened up the chat and then I clicked away from the screen. All right, sorry about that.
No problem. So for those individuals, they would need to go to studentaid.gov to create an account. They'll go through the same process and answer 1 to 4 questions about TransUnion questions. And these individuals would need to answer these questions so they can be identified. So it's so important to answer all of these 4 questions correctly. If these individuals don't answer these questions correctly, then they would have to, once they go through those confirmation page, they will be verified. Once they're verified, they'll go ahead and create their FSA ID and use it immediately. But if they fail the TransUnion verification process, the knowledge base questions will appear, and they will be emailed and assigned a case number along with directions for those individuals. The individual is then required to submit 1 or more combination of assigned attestation form to ID verification at ed.gov. So that individual will have to verify their information, and once they approve that process, then they can create their FSA ID. They will receive an email from the Department of Education, and they will have to provide documents to verify their identity. Currently, the process is not available and it's not working due to backlog. So individuals without Social Security can go ahead and create an FSA ID. Parents without FSA ID can create that with no problem at all. So I suggest that, this will be changing during the calendar year. We're unaware of any situations right now. So, Nikki, do you want to add anything else to this?
Yeah, definitely. I had somebody who was super panicked that touching TransUnion is going to affect their credit. And it does not. Like, people, when I say the word, like, we're going to go to TransUnion, they get the panic look in their face, and it does not affect anyone's credit. And then secondly, I think that folks that are nervous also, if they don't have any credit history, that this isn't going to be able to pull up anything. You'd be surprised how much data they have on us. So they actually, TransUnion, that match, if they do see those questions, there's a lot more there than we would think. So yeah, I think this is being ironed out. This process is being ironed out. Like Florika mentioned, there's a huge backlog, but just get those documents in and we'll get there eventually.
And individuals do you want to add something, Myla?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that for individuals going through this process, it's exactly the same until they get to the very end. And what we're hearing is only about 50% of the people are seeing the TransUnion questions. So if people see the TransUnion questions, there are 4 of them. They have 1 shot to answer them. If they don't answer them all correctly, they're going to fail that verification. They're going to have to document their identity via the process that Flo explained. If they don't see the TransUnion questions at all, again, the majority are not even seeing the TransUnion questions, or not being presented because there's not enough info to have those questions served up. Then what happens is they have to verify their identity manually. And what's happening is there's a huge backlog of manual verifications. So at this point in time, even those people who don't see the TransUnion questions or fail the TransUnion questions and have submitted their documentation manually, they can go ahead and use their FSA ID now. They do not have to wait until their identity is verified. There's a waiver for that temporarily. Eventually, we want them to send in their documentation now, because eventually they won't be able to go through the process unless their identity is verified. But because there's such a significant backlog and there are so many issues with this process, they just have to go through the process of creating it, but their FSA ID, but they don't have to wait until their identity has been verified. So watch for more information. We expect that this waiver will stay in place at least through the end of the year. That's how long it's going to take them to catch up on reviewing the verification document for all the individuals who have had to submit it. Thanks for letting me jump in.
Yeah, Gail had a great question in the chat. If the credit is frozen, can that check still be done?
Yeah, because it's not doing a credit check.
Right.
Okay.
I'm assuming even with the waiver, because they're just letting everybody just use it anyway. Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. Okay.
And most of the times these individuals, oh, go ahead.
No, you're okay, Flo. Keep going.
And most of the times these individuals don't even have credit line available. So it's just making sure that everything is their name, date of birth, address, everything is correctly on that form, or to pass those TransUnion questions once they become available through the verification process. So once they have that, one of the verification process will be a form is the attestation and verification of identity. So they would need to have one of these. So individuals can even use a utility bill, or if they don't have a passport, they can use their utility bill. And sometimes a lot of individuals without Social Security might not have one of the other. So a utility bill is one of those indicating ones, or even a driver's license at that. This information will need to be sent to the following instructions that they will receive with their case number. It's very important to have all of these documentations available, because I think if they don't have all of this information, then it will backlog with the process of getting their identity verified, which could, cost sometimes when they're filling out their form. So we also have FSA ID worksheets for new Mainers. So one of the things that we've known is sometimes working with these individuals is challenging because they have so many documents. Sometimes they're, going through the process. It's so important to just make sure that they have a form that they can write everything down. So we created the 1, 2, 3 new Mainer worksheet. And this worksheet is just for those individuals to write their Social Security number, their alien number, all of those, such thing as email. You wouldn't understand how many times I work with so many families that they're just juggling so much, even in email or certain aspect, they need to have everything written down. And I myself need to have everything written down. So when they have all of this can make the process go so much easier. The 1, 2, 3 sheet is available at faymain.com/newmainers also for download. When individuals are signing in, this was a message that they were receiving. Users were receiving this, and if I received this, I'm like, who went into my account? Who's changing my password? So don't be alert. This is just the FAFSA this was intended to just give you an alert, and nobody has logged into your account. This would no longer be available. This was just the message that individuals were receiving back then. So it will be fixed soon, hopefully.
I think this was something that people were getting every time they logged in, that someone logged in to your account. And I think it's intended to be, hey, someone logged in, but what the message they were getting is that your information had changed. And this has been fixed, or at least has been for me. I tried it, I logged in, and I no longer got that email. So I believe that has been fixed.
And so one of the issues we have too, creating an FSA ID, there's so many errors that could happen. So sometimes when working with students, you want to make sure that when they're writing their name, when they're creating an FSA ID, that they don't have any there's no spaces. Sometimes I have students who are just, I want to get this form done. I've been trying to do it all day. So you can make sure that the student is not using the tab button, the space button, going backspace, that can also cause errors on when creating an FSA ID. If there's an error message and it happens, just keep trying. Sometimes I'm working with families, they're on the phone trying to ask their parents, what address, like, where do you live? Everybody should know where they live, right? But sometimes students have so much going on that sometimes they just need to make sure that this information is accurate. So if you time out, go ahead and just restart the page again. Sometimes I have families who are going through and they get to the end and the page just freezes. And most times, like Jess said earlier, having that form and writing everything down is very crucial. Because if you get timed out and you have to start the form again, then you at least have everything written down. And I notice that sometimes with families, that's a little bit of like relief, because I can imagine, especially working with the new Maynard families, is sometimes that information is not right there. They have to double check. So having that information with you and writing everything down, walking through it, it'll be fine. Push through. There's gonna be times where I was working with somebody and we did the creating an FSA ID, I think about 15 times. And I said, it's not you, sometimes it's the FAFSA. If we're doing a FAFSA help session and we're in a room with 20 students, there's bound to have some internet issues, the site not working, a lot of people using the site at one time. So just clicking out, I think using Google Chrome, using the page in incognito mode, that will help. Trying to use a different device. Sometimes using a different device, using a phone, or just switching out different devices, and just keep trying, because it can be hard, but it most definitely does work.
Could I ask a question about the checklist?
Yes.
Okay, I think it's really cool that you have it, by the way, but is there a checklist like this for students who are not new Mainers?
Yes, so that's where we have the FAME checklist. Did we put that right on?
I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Makes sense. So.
Yep. Sorry, I'll get there in a sec. I'm clicking too much.
Somebody asked, is the family shelter address ever used? Are you in regards to students who live in the shelter who are filing creating an FSA ID?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't seen that, but is that I don't think, if that's where they're living, if that's where they're living, they should use that address, right, Myla? Like, wouldn't you think? If that's where their primary address, so it's their ID address that they should use, where they primarily live.
They will need to list an address that is where they're living. So I would say yes to that. My only concern is it's a little bit different for people who have an SSN versus people who don't. So people who have an SSN, the address isn't as big a deal. It needs to stay consistent, and that's the biggest thing, is they need to consistently use that same address or update it once they move. For people who don't have an SSN, part of the identity verification process is their address. So I think because that's probably temporary in nature, I think we would see that, yes, they could use it, but they're going to have issues if that is not a permanent address that stays with them for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But if they have nothing else, they're going to have to use that. They just want to be sure that they update their FSA ID information by logging in, going to the settings tab, and update their address when that changes. And that's important for everybody.
And we'll walk through that too. So say if that's the only address they have, so a lot of times individuals who have issues with their FAFSA, it has to do with their FSA ID issues. So students can log into studentaid.gov and go into setting. Once they go into setting, and if their ID is not matched, then we know that there's a problem. So you want to make sure that the ID is matched, and if there's any association and any data that needs to change. So for instance, if the student was living at the shelter and then they have that primary address and then they move to a home, then that individual could log into studentaid.gov, go into settings, and then go into updating that, yep, click on settings, and then updating those, add that address and saving those changes. And for individuals who have their FSA ID, once it's matched, then we know there's no issue. So sometimes I could be working with students and then they go into their FAFSA and they want to submit, but then it's not accepting the signature. We need to come back to this setting to see what's going on, because 100% of the time it could be they might put a A instead of a B. There's something is misspelled. There's an issue here. So if anything falls, always check the FSA ID section to make sure that correction. And also, for instance, if students are like, oh, I don't remember what email I used, anything else, if you want to verify that information, you can go here to personal contact information, and then update that section. If you also get a new phone number and you want to add that, you can go ahead and go ahead. This form right here, the FSA ID section, you can go in and update that as many times as you want. You just want to save that information every time there's an update that occurs.
Can I add to this, Florika? Because I just worked with someone recently who got married, a parent got married, and the invitation wasn't working. The student was inviting the parent because they were entering the new name that was recently changed with Social Security. And I said, let's open up the invitation on one device or web browser, and then let's look at the parent's FSA ID, the personal information. And we noticed that the last name was the old last name. It was matched. But like when the invitation and the FAFSA talks to this setting screen to make sure those data pieces match. So we had to change that last name to now what Social Security has, do that match process again. And then we had to wait for that all to happen before we could finish the FAFSA because the invitation wasn't working. And that's where this piece was critical.
Yeah,
And does
that's
that take another 3 days to clear?
Yeah, it's gonna 1 to 3 days. Yeah. Yep.
and also with people who have hyphenated names, and I would say with new maintenance that I work with a lot, sometimes they have multiple last names and middle names. So you want to make sure that it's exactly as that social security card number and going back in. Or sometimes through the immigration process, their name is written backwards. So you can go ahead and make sure everything is just correct.
Sometimes I think it's like, let's just try, like if it's not working, try it a different way, because maybe Social Security has it. If I don't know that everyone has access like I do to walk into a Social Security office, because there's one in my town. So I say, let's try it a different way.
And other issues, if the FSA ID is already in use, what you want to do is say, forgot my username. So click, that's the first option. The second option is you can try to use that authenticator app to verify that information. Also use the mobile phone. I think the mobile phone is the one that I use mostly with students, because sometimes I have my phone right here and nobody barely changed their phone number anymore. And then the email, email or the challenge questions. Those are other ways. And once that none of those 4 options work, then you want to recover your FSA ID. When we did FAFSA help session last year for new maintenance, that FSA ID recovery worked one time. So that's when, if it does work, you will get an email with a link that you will click, and then you could go ahead and take a picture of your photo ID, front and back, and then it will get sent, and then your verification instantly gets verified to log into your account if it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. So you want to make sure that the picture is clear and that everything looks great. And then once you send that, you'll receive that to your account will be verified. The other third thing is you want to recover your account as soon as possible. And then you'll receive a text message too with the link, like we said, a photo ID. I like this process much better with the mobile phone, because sometimes students have that, they have their ID right on them, and then they could do that process and it'll work. If it works, it's great. And then sending the link with the password, or just if you know your username, creating a new password. And each student can just create that as soon as they can. When all fails, you want to actually call the FAFSA helpline. Calling early in the morning, it's great, we said that, or also before closing time. I think the peak hours haven't figured it out yet, but I know, like Nikki said last time, 8 a.m. is great, right before anybody gets on there. And also, you want to just say, I want to talk to an agent. Just go right to an agent. And then if you are not getting through, you want to ask for a tier 2 specialist. I haven't received a tier 2 specialist. I don't know if anybody here has received any on the call. So those are individuals who will get through you and help you right away. But also the live chat. I think the live chat is what much is greater for, especially I'm thinking with the individuals that are new Mainers. Sometimes English is a little bit of a barrier. So students who I worked with in the past would use Google Translate and put that message on the chat. So they'll translate it from their native language to English and then have that so they can help them right away. Also emailing is great. And emailing them, it could be faster, especially for that verification process and everything else. Emailing and calling is great. Did anybody use the chat? Anybody has experience with the phone, with the chat? How was your experience this year with the phone, with the phones? You can unmute yourself if you want to say anything.
I can tell you, I feel like it's working, like I'm getting through more often. Like we did have a lot of hangups in the past, like we're too busy, try again later. I feel like I'm getting through more frequently now than I have in the past. And I did have a situation where I was working with someone that just could not help us. And I didn't even think to send it up the ladder to a tier 2 specialist. And now thinking back after you said that, Flo, I really should have said to the person who was working at Federal Student Aid that maybe we need to speak to someone higher, because they just didn't have an answer for us. And what they were telling us, I was thinking just didn't feel right to me. So that's when I should have said, ask for a tier 2 specialist. I've not done that yet, but I understand that is helpful. And I feel like the live chat or the email is definitely better for folks that English is a second language or don't speak English at all. Because Federal Student Aid won't talk to us, they will only talk to the person. So, I mean, they will allow the person to give permission to share their information with us, but email or live chat is a good option when you're in that situation. Any questions, comments? Thanks, Flo, for that. That was awesome. Anybody have anything to add? Or on my team, anyone have anything to add?
There is a question in the chat. I have a participant who has been sent the link, but the link is not working. Next steps, please. So that was back a little bit ago when Flo was talking about the various options.
Are we
Yeah,
talking
and that was
about-
from me, by the way, and Suzanne here. And I had not realized there was a tier 2, and we had been trying to call, of course, during high volume time. So we've scheduled a meeting for much earlier in the day to try to redress this. We're actually revisiting this tomorrow morning. So, but she was sent the link through her mobile device and was trying to upload her identification in the mobile device, and it simply wasn't working. It wasn't taking. So we're bound and determined. We're going to try again tomorrow, and we'll be earlier, hopefully get through to somebody who can help us. But I had not realized that you could ask for a tier 2. So thank you for that information.
Sure. I'm wondering also if you could forward that link to a different device. I'm wondering if that's an issue.
Possibly. I hadn't even thought of that. So that's another good troubleshooting trick we can try. It's somebody, I mean, the email and the phone are so old. She doesn't even remember what email she used.
Yeah.
It's which all of us run into on occasion, but thank you for this. Has been really informative because now I feel better able to help her tomorrow morning.
I feel like we're all kind of feeling around in the dark right now. So it's frustrating even for us that we've done this for so many years that this is all new process. So don't give up. Keep trying.
They definitely made some changes behind the scenes, and of course, it's information that we can't see, so that it has been so frustrating, because normally we could problem solve and troubleshoot just about anything, and we've hit a wall with some students, and they are having to call. And I feel like it's like the FSA ID information center lottery, right? Some of it simply depends on who you get. So not only elevating it to a tier 2 specialist, but sometimes just calling back and seeing if you get a different person who knows more. It shouldn't be that way, but I have found that to be the case, unfortunately.
We
Okay.
also
Go ahead, Flo.
we also have resources available. We have, if you're ever wanting, to share videos on how to create an FSA ID, like figuring out FAFSA, like what the heck is wrong with my FAFSA? We have animated videos that are available on YouTube, and they're quick 5-minute video, very short. It will walk you through. They're amazing. Nikki did a great job creating these videos, and so everybody else. So we also have, get ready to file checklist, which we shared. And if any link is not working, because I know we had an issue with that, I can send another one too. Just let us know. We also have worksheets for those without FSN, with that Social Security number. We also have a comparing financial aid offer worksheet, and all of those are available at famemain.com/affording higher education, paying for college resources. We can also share that link too. And there's also resources, which we forgot to put on here, but New Mainer, famemain.com/New Mainer website, famemain.com/New Mainers site. And we also have videos there that are gonna come soon, talking about ways to file the FAFSA, going through that process for students to share with. Thank you.
So any more questions before I start the Kahoot? Let's see how you all did. See what's up. I'm gonna start this. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question while this gets going. This will take a second and I will do a new share. Ooh, I love a Kahoot. All right, move some stuff around. All right, we're gonna load the pin. You all know how to do this. You're gonna go to either scan the QR code on your mobile device, or you're gonna go to kahoot.it. You're going to create a little username for yourself. And we're gonna give you a minute for our users to pop in before we start. Oh, you guys are old pros. You know how to do this. So we have 47 people on with us right now on the Zoom. How many people will we have in the Kahoot is the question. I'll give you another minute. And this is for, I want to say, was this the $20 gas card, Jess, as my Vanna?
Yes, this will be a $20 gas card. Look, I even. Ooh.
Oh, hey, Irving, my favorite coffee place.
Yeah, we say gas, but you can get whatever you want there. I don't think it's limited to gas.
I could buy as many Cheetos as I want.
Say it.
Big Cheetos fan, guys. Couple people still coming in. And this is a short 10-minute. Some of the questions I'm going to tell you, they're tricky. So we did give a few more seconds to answer the questions because I didn't want to make this just fluff. I want really, apparently what I've learned this week at adult camp is I'm a bit competitive.
Ooh.
You're
Not
welcome.
Not just fluff, there's some peanut butter too.
Oh, Jess, yes.
It's been a while since I've done a Kahoot, and so it's showing my thing, but it's saying you're in. Oh wait, yeah. See your nickname on the screen? Question mark. Is it just it stays there until it starts? I don't have to click anything.
I feel like if you see your name, I feel we're good.
Okay.
And am more used to running it than playing it myself, so I could be wrong. But don't worry, we're gonna have another Kahoot if there's an issue. You have another chance to play. All right, I feel like this is slowing down. If anyone is not in, please speak up. And if not, I'm gonna move ahead. Here we go, guys. Oh,
Oh, we got a few more coming.
all right. I'm gonna start it. Here we go. Okay. Ooh.
2, 1.
Quiz. When creating an FSA ID, you will not need, but we really recommend if possible.
Ooh. Excellent.
Nice.
Hey.
Your mobile phone. Yes, guys, you were listening. So you don't necessarily need your mobile phone, and then sometimes someone's already used their your number to set up their FSA ID, so you can't actually use it. So you don't need it, but we love it if you can use it, okay?
Yeah, and that's especially true for the teenagers who might have a new phone.
Absolutely. Okay, Amy in the lead. Anything can change at any time. So let's go. True or false? Parents without a social security number will go to studentaid.gov to create their ID. True or false? Okay, so far we have 23. Nice. Same website, studentaid.gov is not a separate website at all, so nailed it, guys. Oh, look at the board switching up. Here we go. True or false? If parents live together and file taxes separately or don't file taxes, both parents need an FSA ID. True or false? This was a tough one. That's why I gave a little extra time here.
Ooh.
True. So remember, if they live together, we need their information, but if they file taxes separately, both need an FSA ID because they both have to give permission for the IRS to send any tax data. That was a tough one, guys. CME's on fire. Fire.
They're pulling 2 different tax documents, not just one.
Yep. Okay, here we go. CME has a hot streak. Here we go. Quiz. Which person would be considered on a parent? Another trick one. Which parent would be considered a
Who's a
parent?
parent on your FAFSA?
Nice. So remember, it really has to do with biological or adopted parents. So if the grandparent has legally adopted the student, that grandparent would be on the FAFSA as a contributor. Foster parent that has not adopted would not. Here we go. You guys are so good.
Oh, big
Oh,
change.
wait. Combo breaker. Okay, 5 players just dropped their answer streak. How many knowledge-based questions will individuals be asked if they don't have a social security number? How many knowledge-based questions are there? There are 4 knowledge-based questions. Nice. John's on fire. Here we go. How many chances will individuals have to answer those knowledge-based questions? How many chances did you get? You get one chance,
Um,
one shot at this, guys. And I don't know if you guys can hear the music. I don't think I shared it, but I can hear it and I'm dancing. That's why. All right. See, the board mixes up. I love this.
Yeah. But Amy and CME are still on.
True or false? Going through TransUnion verification process will impact your credit score. True or false? False. That is not going to touch your credit score at all. You guys are doing amazing.
Excellent.
So good.
Hey.
True or false? Individuals must have a credit history for there to be knowledge-based questions. False. People don't actually have to have a credit history for their, you would be surprised. Big Brother's watching us, y'all. Okay.
Oh
Oh,
no, Brittany dropped off the board completely.
so much happening right now. Two more to go though. Anybody could still get this. True or false? If a parent doesn't answer the knowledge-based question correctly, they're going to need to follow up with federal student aid. True. So remember, well, if all works correctly and they actually get the questions and they don't answer them correctly, they're gonna have to do that attestation form. I had to practice that word, you guys, 20 times. Attestation form, and send their documents in to be verified. Mixing it up again. Okay, here we go, guys. Last question. When will the FSA ID be available to use for those people who don't have the SSN? They go through this. When can you use it? Immediately. They can use that immediately. For those people who don't have the SSN, they go through that process, they can use their FSA ID immediately. Okay, here we go, guys. Just like the Olympics. Third place is Sean. Second place, CME. And number one, who's getting it?
JD.
JD. Awesome. Jess, you're gonna be in contact?
Yeah, so JD, if you can send me, I mean, you can send everybody your name and address in the chat, or you can send it just directly to me and we will mail you that gas card. So again, just send me a message directly and we will make sure we get it on its way. Congratulations, JD.
All righty. Well, thank you all. That was great. Flo, Nikki, Jess, all of our participants. Thank you so much. We are a little behind schedule. So we were going to have a break from